telepathically, because you mentioned Libya, and I did too. We invented responsibility to protect as a concept for the world. It got accepted by the whole of the world in UN in 2005. And it said when there's massive abuse of human rights of a people, sovereignty is no more an absolute. We have a responsibility to go in and protect them. So you got Libya, and you've got the abuses of the people. So what do? We start implementing the responsibility to protect concept, although the current government doesn't even want to use the term. So it started the economic restrictions, the political restrictions. It was doing very well. And then one day, Gaddafi said, I'm going to stay in power if I have to crush every one of those cockroaches to do so. The day he said that was the day our troops should have been deployed on the ground to protect those innocent people. Because those are exactly the words that the extremists use in the genocide in Rwanda. And what happened? We didn't have the guts to do that. So we decided to fiddle at 10,000 feet. And if you think that's going to bring it out, we have now created a stalemate that might solve itself, instead of actually implementing a concept that we created and that we, in fact, convinced the world to accept, but none of them have the guts to implement. When you put a microphone in front of a general who's an apprentice politician, you're in for a long haul.
One more question.
Okay.
Senator Dallaire, first let me thank you for introducing the legislation you just mentioned, especially with the clause on the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. Now my question is, does that legislation include initiatives to rehabilitate and take care of the child soldiers if and when we bring them here? And I ask this question because Canada has a history of having a very open immigration policy, but a very inadequate welcoming party. So when the odd child soldier, the odd refugee goes into a gang, everybody goes against immigration. But that's because we don't have this infrastructure.
Yes.
There's not enough infrastructure to help.
Absolutely excellent point. And look at the over-Canada case as an example. Bringing them back to Canada and putting them through a non-punitive judicial system to meet the optional protocol was one thing. But then the second element of that is rehabilitation and reintegration. That's the whole package that goes with a child soldier, ex-child soldier. You just don't say, demobilize them and then say, either they do a bit of penance or not and then throw them in the street. I mean, you can imagine what sort of a scenario that creates. And so rehabilitation, reintegration is taken as a responsibility of society. And so that's not just federal, that's provincial, municipal, that's NGO in local areas. So I haven't put it into the legislation because it is part of the elements of our society that should be doing that. Whether we're doing it effectively or not, helping our new immigrants and helping them establish and so on. And if we're failing there, it's a failure of society, not a failure of law, a failure of society. So, and of the society demanding of its different governments to invest into creating those capabilities. So you've opened up an idea that I'll take a second look at whether or not the federal government should, in that legislation, because this stuff is provincial, eh? So how do we do that? But I'll take a second look at that aspect. But certainly, my aim is to mobilize the youth of this country to sit in the galleries of the Senate and of the House of Commons when I introduce this legislation, and to be outside with placards and sustaining it as we debate the introduction of this legislation. I'm not looking for the adults, although I'm certainly counting on them to support their youth of coming out and saying that their peers are being massively abused, and this country cannot talk from both sides of its mouth. It can't say on one side, we should not in Libya use children, or in any other country use children for war, yet when it comes to our country, when we have those who've been abused, we don't even recognize how we can fill our responsibilities in regards to diffusing and ultimately also bringing to justice those who perpetrate this crime against humanity. My legislation is pushing the Justice Department also, because we know there are people here in this country from either Rwandan genocide or other conflicts who are running around this country, and he threw out that list of 30, which is I'm still not sure I like that, because one of the reasons they threw out the list of 30 people that they suspected is because the international investigation team and judicial team in the Ministry of Justice that goes after these bad people who are in our country have been defunded. Instead, at a time when more people are trying to sneak in to hide here, that we should be going after them and bringing them to justice. I was a witness at the only one we've ever used that law in Montreal, and he's got a life sentence. It was a Rwandan genocide. But it cost nearly $2 million to do it. But we have actually taken away the funds from that section to actually go after these people and put them in jail. So one of the ways that the government has decided is that instead of doing justice that we've created, what we'll do is we'll throw their names out there, and if somebody finds them, we'll pick them up and we'll throw them out. Right? And we'll throw them out to a country that has torture and also they can kill them, capital punishment. And that's against other laws that we said we would never do that. So we got some real serious problems in the continuity of thinking of how this country evolved over decades and decades and decades, and now is being fiddled with. And I tell you, it's being fiddled with. And one day you're going to wake up. And I'm not political. I mean, I could have been independent or liberal, but my mother was a liberal, so I went liberal. She would have disowned me, even though she's 92. One day we're going to wake up, and we're going to find out that this country ain't the country that we were building. Thank you very much.